Hey, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Mondays with Mike. Got, I think, an important one today. We're going to talk about sort of an in-depth look at the latest forecast update that came out of the team at Colorado State University from Dr. Phil Klotzbach and his team. They came out with their August update as to what to expect for the rest of this hurricane season. And I'll show you kind of what goes into their process. We also have an increasing drought here across Texas. We've got an incredible heat wave that we're in the middle of. And so let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. And I'm going to go ahead and sort of show you the paper that was released here with their August update and some of the details of it that we usually don't have a chance to get into, on the air. Oh, by the way, sorry, I digress. I'm in our new weather center right now. Beautiful. So we got the two big monitors here. I've got the tropical update. We have the scroll, your Gulf Coast Weather Authority. Now the graphic behind me, I know looks funny, but it's not hats yo. It's not actually hats yo. It's that's your point is what it is. You just can't see the T in the U. So it looks like, if you're wondering, that's what it is. Okay, so let's get into it. So the forecast that came out called for 18 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. Now, technically, we've already had 5 storms. Okay, we've had Arlene, Brett, Cindy, and Don. Don briefly became a hurricane. So we've had those 4. And this is a very, very unusual situation where before the hurricane season started, the National Hurricane Center went back and re-examined a storm that occurred off the East Coast in January. And they determined that it was indeed a subtropical storm. And so it would have gotten a name had it been upgraded at the time. So they've retroactively upgraded it as an unnamed storm. So what that means is we're actually on the D storm, but technically it's the 5th storm of the year. And so because there are 18 total storms that are expected, that means 13 more. And it also means 7 more hurricanes and 4 major hurricanes, because obviously we have not had any major hurricanes yet as of this point. So I'd like to go ahead and talk about what is in the report. So let me go ahead and open that up for you. I'm going to share the screen. And here we go. Hold on just a second. Click on this, and I'm going to share the screen because it's a lot to go over, really. So here we go. Minimize this. So here we go. So we're looking at, this is the Atlantic hurricane season forecast for this season. I'm going to put my glasses on because, these eyes are not getting any younger. Okay, so this is the 3rd of August release, which came out last week. So they're saying they maintain their forecast for an above average 2023 Atlantic hurricane season, while a robust El Nino, which, by the way, usually inhibits activity, is going to persist for the rest of hurricane season and probably into this winter too, by the way. There is record warm water in the Atlantic Ocean. That are 2 of the competing factors that are going against each other as far as this forecast is concerned. So far, though, this is not a high confidence forecast, but they're still expecting it to be above average. So let's zoom down a little bit and take a look at some of the numbers. And so you'll see here on the screen that they have a table here of what they have predicted through this cycle. And so back in April, they were predicting 13 named storms, which would be approximately an average season, maybe a slightly below average season. And that was based on the strength of the developing El Nino. Now, that was increased when their forecast was issued in June. They increased it to 15. It was increased to 18 in July. And now it's been maintained at 18. Again, given the fact that we've already had 5. So that leaves more hurricanes to lie ahead. That leaves 8 more hurricanes, I should say. I said 7 before. That leaves 8 more hurricanes and 4 more major hurricanes. So what goes into all this? Well, let's take a look. So there are a few things that they look at depending on the time of the year. So for their, what they call their methodology for August, what they look at are a few different things. So right now, this map that you see here highlights what three of the primary indicators that they use during their update that comes up, in August. So I just want to go ahead and annotate this. So we're looking at these areas that I have circled right here. So one of them, number one, is July. It says 10 MU. Well, what in the world is 10 MU? That's a 10 meter, and U means an east to west wind direction. So they're looking for any anomalies of unusual west winds or unusual east winds, or maybe a weaker than normal trade winds, basically, across the Caribbean Sea. They're also looking at number two, which is this area over here in the Eastern Atlantic Ocean, right here, that I have highlighted. And that is July sea surface temperatures. So what they're seeing there, and I'll show you that here in a minute, is that it's extremely warm. And so that's a big boost as far as their prediction method. And they're also looking over here at the west coast of Africa, where it says July 200 HPAU. What does that mean? Well, it means 200 hectopascals. So we're up at about 35,000 feet or higher, maybe 38,000 feet, 40,000 feet, way up into the atmosphere. And that's a pressure level. So this is really the highest that jets usually fly. And U is, again, that horizontal wind direction. So is there an anomaly of it blowing a little bit more east or a little bit more west, or changes in that average wind direction? So based on these three things, they take these into account when making this particular forecast for this time of the year. So we can see how those have had an effect. So this chart right here shows what the condition is of that July 10 meter wind, which is number one, which is in the Caribbean Sea. That one is neutral. So at this point, it's not having a positive effect or a negative effect on the formation of hurricanes. One that sticks out like a sore thumb is this one, July SST. So that's July sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic. Now, what's most noteworthy here is where it says plus 3.0 SD. What does that mean? Well, SD is a standard deviation, and it's a statistical term. One standard deviation. So you know how you've heard of this bell curve, right? Like, let's say you were to plot everybody's height in your office or something like that. It would make a bell curve, where most people would be like, well, with the average of the men and women, let's say most people would be like 5'8" or something. And then you would have fewer super tall people, and then even fewer, really, really tall people. And the same thing, you would have fewer really short people. So it makes this bell curve. And we see that all over statistics. It doesn't matter, almost what anything is. So within that, one standard deviation on either side takes up, I think, about 58%. I'm going all the way back to college here. Of more than half of everything falls within that one standard deviation. Two standard deviations includes more than 90% of all of the outcomes. Three standard deviations, if you're at three standard deviations, that means that you are like in the 99th percentile, basically. So like if you were dividing up the height of people, three standard deviations would be like people who play in the NBA at center, 7 feet tall people. That would be three standard deviations, because most people are nowhere near that, right? So that bell curve we're talking about right on the ends. So when we talk about sea surface temperatures, we're talking about almost off the chart warmth over here in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, because of this huge increase here, when it says effect on the 2023 hurricane season right here, it's a significant enhancement in their forecast. So we've already gone through the first two. One is neutral, one is significantly enhance, and then there's another one that is a little bit of a monkey wrench in the works here, and that is what's happening here in Africa, which essentially is leading to weaker and less frequent tropical waves, because, you know, they come off of the west coast of Africa. So we've seen fewer tropical waves. And by the way, we've also seen dustier air, so more plumes of dust. So the way the weather pattern has been setting up over here in Africa, it's significantly suppressed activity. So that's why this forecast is so uncertain, because when you look at the three things that they use for their August forecast, you have one that's neutral, one that significantly enhances, and then one that significantly suppresses. And so far, the suppressing one has been winning, because despite the fact that we have this extremely warm water in the Atlantic, nothing has really happened out there very much yet at all. So that's what's going on with that, as far as, you know, what went into their forecast. So we could look, let's see, under this, what is really interesting, because a lot of people will ask, well, how accurate has their forecast been? You know, how much stock should we put in this? Well, the way to look at it is this: every year they strive to get better. And the way they do that is through something called a hindcast. Have you ever heard of a hindcast before? Well, it's the opposite of a forecast. You know, a forecast is you're trying to take the conditions now and you're trying to predict into the future what's going to happen. A hindcast is actually really an interesting way of studying things, because you take your current method of forecasting, like those three things that I just mentioned, and then you apply that to past hurricane seasons. So you get all of the data from 2022, 2021, 1983, 1992. You get all the data for those years, and you say, how would our forecast have performed in all of those previous years? And then based on that, you know if you're onto something, you know if your method is working. And so here's a chart that shows that. So the blue lines here, this goes all the way back to 1979. The blue lines that you see here are tracking what is called ACE, which is accumulated cyclone energy, which, remind me, I'll talk more about that here in just a second. But what it shows is that the blue line and then the red line, which represents their hindcast, their method for forecasting, it's excellent. I mean, there's a very, very, very good sort of lining up of how their forecast would have performed versus what actually happened. Now, as far as, we're not tracking number of storms here, and see how it says R.81? That means basically they matched with 81% accuracy what actually happened based on their forecast method. Now, you may be wondering, what is ACE? Well, ACE, accumulated cyclone energy, is based on not just how many storms you have, but how strong the hurricanes were and how long they lasted. So let's say you have a 150 mile per hour Cat 4 hurricane and it lasts for 7 days. That's going to have a huge ACE value. If you have a 50 mile per hour tropical storm that lasts for 2 days, it's going to have a teeny weeny ACE value. The reason ACE it has an advantage in sort of defining a hurricane season is that, think about it with named storms. Perfect example is this storm, Tropical Storm Arlene. Tropical Storm Arlene formed back in very early June, I think June 2nd. It was tiny, and it was over to the south of the Florida Panhandle. You probably don't even remember it. And it just dropped toward the south, and it was very poorly defined. The winds very briefly reached 40 miles per hour, and then it dissipated. Well, why do I bring that up? Well, because it got a name. So that one did get a name, but it was borderline. I mean, close. So when we're talking about predicting how many named storms, you're going to get some storms that are so borderline that maybe they would have gotten named 20 years ago, maybe they wouldn't have. So that's why it's very difficult to forecast the number of storms, because there's a human element to it. But when you're talking about ACE, or accumulated cyclone energy, that really is predicting the total, not just the total number of storms, but how strong they're going to be, how long lasting they're going to be. And so a season with high ACE is going to have a lot of very big, very strong storms that last for a long time. So I hope that makes sense. The total energy of the hurricane season compared to the numbers, which are kind of arbitrary. So that's why I really like, kind of using this ACE term. It really is pretty important. And you know what? Maybe I should use it a little bit more often. I have a feeling it would be a little confusing to sort of say like, oh, here's the current ACE. We're at 100, and that might be a little confusing. Let me know. Let me know what you think. Okay, so one of the factors in their forecast was what are called sea surface temperature anomalies. An anomaly is something that's unusually above or unusually below. And in this case, we're talking about, is it warmer than average or cooler than average? So on the right-hand side of your screen here, we have the anomalies for the Atlantic Ocean. And you're seeing a lot of orange and a lot of red. So that means that we are anomalously warm all across the Atlantic that I've circled here. So from the west coast of Africa, all across the tropical Atlantic right here, heading into especially the Gulf of Mexico, and lesser extent here, the Caribbean. The Caribbean is not as unusually warm as the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico are. So that being said, they're all unusually warm. And when you look at the specific numbers here of the anomaly, you're going to see here. Now, I know this map is a mess to look at, but just stay with me. So the numbers that you see here, you'll see a 1, and occasionally you'll see a 2. That is degrees of Celsius now. We're not talking about Fahrenheit, degrees Celsius above average. So most of the Atlantic Ocean here is between 1 and 2 degrees warmer than average. Now, keep in mind, 1 degree Celsius is almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit. It's like 9/5. So 1 to 2 degrees above average is about 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit above average. And that's pretty significant. That's a lot. And so with that in mind, that's one of the factors going into this. In fact, especially across the Gulf of Mexico, we're like more than 2 degrees Celsius above. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So that is one of the factors going into their forecast. And so the bottom line is, from all indications now, we're sort of in a battle between the extremely warm water and some of the inhibiting factors like the dust and the less frequent tropical waves coming off the coast of Africa. All right, well, let's talk about a couple other things, which is the heat wave that's been ongoing here across and it's not just Texas. I know Texas has seen some of the worst of it, but it isn't just us. There have been records. I was looking at Baton Rouge, Louisiana, of course, the state capital of Louisiana. They went through at least 7 days, and I think now longer, where they hit a record high temperature every single day. And that's rare to do. I mean, you might hit, like we've hit 100 for so many days in a row, but we've had some records, but we haven't had a record every single day. They've had a record every single day. New Orleans has been setting records. They've been above 100, which doesn't happen very often at all. I know my old stomping grounds in Lafayette, Louisiana, they've been breaking records. And all over Texas, I mean, it's just been brutal. San Antonio and Austin have been close to 105 every day. Dallas has been up to around 107. So it's it's pretty wild, and it's going to continue. So this is a look ahead at next week, next week. So this is showing us the 11th to the 15th, which is going to take us from, let's see. Oh, the end of this week through the early part of next week. That's what it's showing us. So basically this weekend and even into early next week. And what does it show? Well, this is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from NOAA, and it's showing more above average temperatures. West Coast, the entire, what you call like the Sun Belt region of the United States, New Mexico, Texas, all the way back over to Florida, it's going to stay abnormally hot. And then we can look at the precipitation outlook, and we're looking to be in the normal precip category, mostly because we could have some rain on the way early next week. Fingers crossed on that one, definitely, because we desperately need it. And this is the last thing that I'll talk about here, and that is the drought. The latest drought monitor maps that were released at the end of last week show that much of our area, so we're talking about Galveston County, Brazoria, Matagorda counties, are under moderate drought conditions right now. Those of you in eastern Harris County, as well as Chambers and Liberty County, under a severe drought currently. And then as you go farther out toward the west, this is what I have highlighted is Bexar County, San Antonio, and then up to the Travis County, the Austin area. All of these locations are now bordering on extreme drought. And this whole area out here in the Texas Hill Country, and then even heading up to North Texas, they're going to experience critical fire weather conditions. So they call it fuel, actually, is the term that's used, which is like dry brush, dry trees, dry grass. They call it fuel. So there's a lot of available fuel out there that, and there was already a fire that took place this past weekend in San Marcos, probably the first of many that are going to be forming here, hopefully not, but I think so, across Texas over the next couple of weeks, if we don't really get that much help in the form of rainfall. So I hope this was educational. I hope it wasn't too boring. Shout out to my mom and brother for watching. And shout out to everybody else out there. Hope everybody's going to stay cool. We're going to be above 100 all week long. Lots of 102 and 103 degree high temperatures. Today, a scorcher, of course. So everybody try and stay cool out there. And oh, by the way, real quick, if you have a smart TV, Amazon TV, Roku, Apple TV, any of those, head to the App Store and search Fox Local. That's the best way to watch us right now, Fox Local. That way you can see all of our streaming content. You can watch all of our newscasts and all of the extra goodies that we do in between the newscasts. It's all free, completely free. There's no subscription. And you could also watch all of our different Fox owned and operated stations around the country. You can watch the news from Phoenix, from Chicago, from New York City, from Atlanta, from Tampa, anywhere, from Austin and Dallas, anywhere you want to go. You can watch their newscasts too, which is kind of neat if you just want to check out what everybody's doing, or maybe if you're going to be doing any traveling. So Fox Local, go ahead and download that on your smart TV, and I will see you next Monday. Take care.